Section 2.3, bioaccumulation on ecosystems. What was an ecosystem? We gave that definition. Basically, it's how all the different areas and all the different biotic and abiotic factors relate to each other in a given area. Could be as small as a log or a pond, could be as big as a mountain range. So, our word of the day, boys and girls, is bio, living. Accumulation, the gradual buildup of chemicals in living organisms. All of you, for example, have far more mercury in your bodies than, say, your great-grandparents did, especially if you're a seafood eater. That's why you may have heard if females are pregnant, they're supposed to avoid seafood to avoid passing it on to their fetus. The mercury is a bad one. They absorb it from the surroundings as they eat and live. For example, some people don't eat some types of seafood as it is too high in mercury. Our body has no way of metabolizing, that's the fancy word for processing, absorbing, and getting rid of, metabolizing mercury. Mercury is a bad one because, Alex, as far as I know, we can't even metabolize it artificially. In other words, once mercury is in you, I don't think medical science knows how to remove it from you. Okay? So it simply builds up in our body. And this can cause problems.
Is there a safe amount?
Pardon me?
Is there a safe amount?
Not really. Mercury is a nasty one. Okay? I think I talk about what. Do I talk about what it does later on in this lesson? Yes, I do. I'll talk about what it does. But the main one is it links with neurons in your brain and binds with them and makes them not work. It does brain damage, which out of all of them is by far the most serious thing. So, these chemicals may be harmful if not metabolized or excreted. That's the fancy word for pooped by the animal. The chemicals simply build up in their bodies and they start to interfere with chemical reactions in their body. I'll give you, what's the one I'm thinking of? I got to look at the periodic table. It is, so our bodies, Matt, can you look behind you on the periodic table? Can you see where phosphorus is? Its element right after silicon. It's on the right-hand side in blue. Okay, the P there, capital P, it's element 15 or 16, I think. Is that right? 15? What's right below it? Arsenic. From what you've heard of arsenic, is it good for you or bad for you? Do you know? Okay, it's a poison, right? The reason is your bodies use phosphorus. Your bodies use phosphorus in their bone development and in their muscle development. It's a very important nutrient. That was part of last day's lesson. Because arsenic is in the same column on the periodic table, it has the same number of valence electrons. It will bond with the same chemicals that want to bond with phosphorus, and it'll then take them out of play. It'll take them out of your system. That's not good because your body won't distinguish. It hasn't evolved any way to distinguish between phosphorus and arsenic. All those chemicals are just looking for something that wants to, phosphorus wants to gain 3 electrons. So there's all these chemicals that have 3 extra electrons to get rid of. They'll bond with arsenic as well. Okay. So they can cause birth defects, because especially since the fetus is growing so fast, the cells are dividing so fast, that can be a real problem, a real issue. Matt, you don't have your phone out or something, do you? Okay. Is that a note? Yeah. Okay, let me pause the video for 1 second. So, how do we know this? Well, we have something that we call, and this is going to be a word they'll probably throw at you on the provincial, a keystone species. When something is the key to something, does that mean it's more important than average or less important than average? So it turns out often in an ecosystem there's a keystone species. This is a species that can greatly affect population numbers in an entire ecosystem. A great example, salmon is a keystone species because so many predators in trophic levels above it eat salmon, including humans. But also, salmon also eat other things that are important to keep in check. So here's the key question, and the answer probably is pretty obvious. If a keystone species takes up a lot of a contaminant, mercury, arsenic, what would happen to other organisms higher up in the food chain? They probably wouldn't vanish. Instead, bioaccumulation. The toxins would accumulate in a greater toxicity, in a greater percentage, in a greater strength as you move up the food chain. So, once again, here's our word of the day. Biomagnification. What does bio mean? Living. What does a magnifying glass do? Makes bigger. So this is, again, you can memorize this definition, but I think you can figure it out. Biomagnification is the process by which chemicals become more concentrated in higher trophic levels. Put your pencils down, look up. Hey, what does ppm mean? Parts per? Oh, excellent. So it's really saying if you looked at 1 million molecules, how many of them would be this toxin? So here is a chart over here. Plankton has 0.04 parts per million, which means most plankton don't have any of this toxin. On average, they have less than 1 part per million. Minnows, almost every minnow has a little bit, 1 part per million. So if you have 1 million minnows, the odds are you'll have some toxin. Adult fish absorb more. Herons eat the adult fish. Ospreys eat either the herons or more adult fish. Cormorant eat lots of adult fish. Yep.
That's just going to be pesticides.
That can be from changing those nutrient cycles. So humans, pesticides can be one particular. There are also some natural sources of toxins as well. But you know what? Whatever nature can pollute, we can really do better. It's one of our gifts. Okay? So if something is toxic, for example, at 2 parts per million, it's more toxic than something that is toxic at 100 parts per million. If something is toxic at 100 parts per million, Rachel, we're saying you need 100 of those in every million molecules to do damage. If something is toxic at 2, you say, I only need 2 of those to do damage. The lower your parts per million toxicity is, the worse it is, because that means all you need is a tiny bit, we're in trouble. The higher that number is as a toxicity, the better it is. Not in terms of how much is absorbed per animal, but in terms of toxicity. It's also used to show how concentrated a contaminant is in a plant or animal. So if ppm stands for parts per million, boys and girls, can we guess what ppb would stand for? Alex? And that's even worse. If something is toxic in parts per billion, then it's really toxic, because then you're saying, oh yeah, you only need 1 per billion to do damage. That's even worse than 1 per million. So let's talk about a specific example. PCBs and the orca, because that's local. When I was young, we called orcas killer whales, and so I'll occasionally still slip into that and do that. We don't like calling them that because killer whales made them sound like they were these bloodthirsty things that we wanted to exterminate. They're really not. In fact, they're not whales, right? Do you guys know that? They're dolphins. They're large dolphins. So, okay. So, we have a chemical that is called polychlorinated biphenyls, but it was abbreviated. For a candy, can anybody look at this and see if they can come up with the abbreviation, 3 letters, 3 capital letters? You've heard it. You may not have known. What? PCBs, Rachel, candy for you. PCBs are polychlorinated biphenyls. They're used in paints, plastics, lubricants, etc. But it's used in paints, plastics, lubricants. It's used all over the place. Well, one of the things it does, it can suppress the immune system, and it can also cause cancer. What's the fancy word for something that causes cancer? So it's carcin, I-C-I-N, Mr. Dueck? Yes, it is. Genic. If you don't know what carcinogenic means, you can put in brackets. Causes cancer. And it has a very long, hey, this is good review, half-life. From radiation, what was half-life? That was how long it took for half of the amount to decay and disperse. Shorter half-life is nicer because that means it'll vanish in a hurry. Longer half-lives, that means it's stuck in a room for a while. Oh, and you can put a little colon right there. I think I forgot to put that. Half-life is the time it takes for a substance to decrease by half. Well, PCBs have been banned. I don't know if that's worldwide or North American-wide. I need to look that up. Since 1977. But they're going to continue to affect orcas until at least 2030. So we banned them, let's call it 1980 is a nice round number. We're in 2015. Well, from 1980 to 2030, 50 years. Orca are long-lived. Because they're long-lived, that means they accumulate lots of PCBs. If they were short-lived, they wouldn't have as much time to accumulate that. So these really affect species that have long lifespans. And usually species that have long lifespans don't reproduce very quickly. Here's our picture. The PCB load of the orca is much higher than that of any other animal in the world. So when an orca eats 5 kilograms of salmon, it's ingesting PCBs and other pollutants from about 4,500 kilograms of microscopic plants and algae. Here's the bioaccumulation. Mud and water contaminated with PCBs and other forms of chemical pollution run off from the land or just dumped in, because we used to dump our trash in the oceans. 70 and 80 years ago, barges would just haul our junk into the ocean, dump it over the side, sanks. As far as we were concerned, that took care of everything. So plants eat the bad stuff. Small invertebrates like plankton, like shrimp, eat that. Small fish eat the shrimp. Salmon, and then the orca gets the highest concentration. Biomagnification or bioaccumulation. Turn the page. Or is it turn the page ready for you guys? Okay. There's also something called persistent organic pollutants called POPs, POPs. Organic meant it contained carbon and usually hydrogen. These remain in the soil for many, many years. All right. What do you think dichloryl diphenyl trichloroethane is? This is also a famous 3-letter acronym. This is DDT. It was introduced in 1941 to kill mosquitoes, and it's great at it. It's great. How many of you like mosquitoes? We're not too bad in North America, because for us here in BC, all a mosquito does is make you itch, although now some of them do carry West Nile virus. But in most of the world where it's warmer, what terrible disease do mosquitoes carry? Malaria. So my dad grew up in South America. He had malaria as a child and a relapse as an adult. Malaria kills millions and millions of people a year. Yep.
Is it true that if you eliminated mosquitoes, it would throw off the entire food chain?
If you eliminated mosquitoes, would it throw off the entire food chain? That's a very loaded question, because I suspect there are many different species of mosquitoes. If you eliminated mosquitoes around the world, probably. But if you eliminated mosquitoes in certain areas that are inhabited by humans, probably not so much. That's a good question. We've always got to be careful in mucking around with nature. We always think we know what we're doing, and inevitably it's more complicated than we thought. So, DDT was introduced in 1941 to kill disease-carrying mosquitoes. Although it's now banned in many countries, it has a long half-life and it persists in the environment. It stays in the soil for as long as I have a commercial. This may be one of the scariest commercials I've ever seen. What else? Heavy metals. No, not the musical genre with the long hair. Okay. Heavy metals, we're going to talk about some of them on the periodic table. These don't degrade within the environment. At least DDT and PCBs eventually get broken down and phased out. Heavy metals don't. They can't be destroyed. They're stuck there unless we develop some type of radical new technology, and I haven't heard anything recently. There are three that are the most common. Lead. Generally present in all soil at about 15 parts per million to 40 parts per million. That's just because lead is found in the ground. So it's there to begin with. However, this has increased due to human activities. Sorry. Where was this once used? Well, several locations. So it was once used. Question? No? Once used in insecticides. Insecticides. Oh, and it works great because lead is really toxic. It'll really kill bugs. And us. It's really toxic. It works great. Insecticides. It was once used in lead-based paints. In fact, it used to be used to paint cribs. And I think I mentioned this the other day. Little toddlers, you'll see them chewing on their crib bars all the time. They were ingesting lead paint. We didn't know any better. We do now. It's once used in leaded. This is one of the big ones, gasoline. So they made the switch. They banned leaded gasoline in about 1980. All cars now were made unleaded, but from about 1980 to still 1990, you could still get what was called regular or unleaded because the older cars that required regular leaded gas. What lead, when you added it to gasoline, it made your car's engine knock and ping less. But all that lead got belched out the exhaust and ended up in the atmosphere and ingested by humans. We believe there was so much lead in the atmosphere in the 1950s and 60s and 70s. We actually have measured your guys' IQ points have gone up compared to your great-grandparents because you have had less lead in your brain. It's traceable. My generation was stupider. My dad's generation even dumber. Not because they were because they were being toxically affected. It's still used in electronics. So please don't throw old phones in the trash. Recycle them. And there's also many other toxic heavy metal chemicals in electronic devices. Please recycle them. So it's toxic at a level of 0. I gotta look this up. 0.0012 parts per million.
Wait a minute, you said there was more of that in the soil. You said in the soil it was present in 15 to 40.
Yeah, don't eat dirt. I'm sorry, Captain. That's why it's bad to eat dirt. Okay.
But we grow stuff in there.
Yeah, but the plants don't absorb it or they filter it out. Okay. Next one. cadmium. This is found in the Earth's crust and released into the environment through rock weathering, forest fires. What's another way we learned this year that stuff can get from down inside the Earth to the top of the Earth? Begins with the letter V. The letter V is in vampire. Volcanoes. Volcanoes belch out toxins. That's why you don't want to stand downwind of an eruption. Aside from the lava, it's still not good. But those are natural processes. We can do it better. So it's also released in the manufacture of plastics and nickel-cadmium batteries. They're called NiCad batteries for short. The Ni stands for nickel. The Cad stands for cadmium, which is also why please recycle batteries. They're chemically attracted to organic matter in the soil. This one is attracted, Matt, to plants. Okay? Bugs. So it's absorbed by plants, and then it works its way up trophic levels. Tobacco plants are especially receptive to this process. This is one of the many reasons you shouldn't smoke. What does cadmium do? Well, it remains in your kidneys and bone tissue with a half-life of 30 years. Pause for a second. So, cadmium. Mercury. Mercury. Approximately 6,000 tons a year enters the environment from natural processes. Because, I mean, all of these things are found on Earth in the environment. We didn't make them from nothing. They were here already. So don't get me wrong. They're there, Taylor. But we can do better, sadly. This has doubled in the past 150 years. How? Well, from fossil fuels, burning those, one of the byproducts of burning natural gas or oil or coal is mercury. Mining, they use a lot of mercury in the chemical processes that they use to separate, for example, gold from the rock, or silver from the rock, or copper from the rock. Is there somebody out there we're all staring? No? Okay. Yeah? One of my students coming in? Back? Okay. Batteries. So please recycle them. Yes, yes, yes. Come on in. Coal burning releases huge amounts into the atmosphere. I'm going to add one more because it's become relevant in the 2 years since I last taught Science 10. So you can add right here. I think it's spelled like that, escent bulbs. More and more of you in your home, you're replacing the old incandescent bulbs, the ones that just got hot, with the spirally bulbs. Please, all of these contain a mercury little switch. Recycle them properly, dispose of them properly, please. Because mercury is a bad one. Why is mercury so bad? It affects the nervous system, especially the brain and the immune system in humans. You may have heard the expression mad as a hatter. We think that came from the fact that 200 and 300 years ago, hatters, people that made hats for a living, they made the hats out of felt, and the material felt was stored with or preserved with or made soft with mercury. So we think the expression mad as a hatter was because they were inhaling mercury fumes all the time. It damaged their brain and they went mad, they went loopy. No, he took that from, that was a common English expression. The Mad Hatter was taken from the expression mad as a hatter. Okay. If you're bored sometime, look at jobs 200 and 300 years ago. There are entire sections of jobs that were a death sentence for the people that did them, but we just didn't know, or they had no choice. Even nowadays, mining is not a good one on your body or your, right? There are jobs that are very, very dangerous. So, how can we reduce the effects? What's the opposite of bioaccumulation and biomagnification? Well, the word that we use is bioremediation. A remedy fixes bio, life, bioremediation, the fixing of the environment. In particular, it's using living organisms, usually microscopic like bacteria, that feed on these toxins naturally. So there's a whole sub-branch of science where, Alex, we're studying the millions of different types of bacteria. I think it was someone here who was commenting last day that there was algae that make oil. We're also looking for algae or other microscopic organisms that will absorb some of these. But we have to be careful because, okay, they may absorb these chemicals, they may turn them into something else, or maybe they'll spread and do damage in different ways we haven't thought of. But we're trying now, rather than doing things through an artificial manner, we are trying now to see if we can, well, use Mother Earth in our favor. So, sorry? To cure, you know what? Probably not, but maybe to minimize the damage? Yeah. Cure would be great. I don't know if we're ever going to get there. So the idea is it converts harmful substances into harmless or maybe even just less harmful substances. Ty. Pause for a second. So in summary, this chapter looked at cycling through ecosystems. First of all, we looked at how energy cycled through ecosystems. So you should know how to make or read a food chain for the provincial exam. You should know that 10% of the energy gets passed on to the next trophic level. You should know what a trophic level was. That was the next level up on the food chain. But the fancy word for that was trophic level. But the reason there's fewer animals on the next level up is only 10% of the energy gets passed up. So you can only have about 10% of the number of animals as you had the time before. That's why very few eagles, lots of bugs. Going back to the bottom of the food chain. Need to know the 3 cycles. It's on the chart, comma, maybe I shouldn't put that in the notes. Sorry. It's all on the chart. Okay? Toxins. You need to know the difference between bioaccumulation and biomagnification. What was the difference between the 2 words? Hey, let's go look. Bioaccumulation was the gradual buildup of chemicals in living organisms. Oh, went too far, Mr. Dueck. Where was biomagnification? That's the process by which the chemicals become more concentrated. In other words, biomagnification leads to bioaccumulation. Okay? That's being really technical, but okay. What else do you need to know? You need to know what parts per million means, parts per billion means. And you need to know what the major contaminants and problems are. This they will actually ask you on the provincial. So, lead, cadmium, mercury, PCBs, DDT. There are others, but those are the ones that seem to show up the most often. Okay? And if you want to, for the provincial, you can read page 90 and page 102. Apparently those are fair game, and they're interesting, but I'm not going to go over them now. What's your homework? Then I want to go over the Chapter 7 test. I apologize because I'm talking for most of the class here, I know.